When Marcus handed me divorce papers the same week Grandma Dot's lawyer read her will, I thought I'd lost everything. My marriage, my sister, and all I had left was a rotting Victorian house nobody wanted. 6 months later, when Marcus showed up begging on his knees, I just smiled and closed the door. What happened in between changed everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was folding laundry in our Pinewood Estates home. Marcus's mother, Patricia, her voice thick with tears, told me that Grandma Dot had passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 81 years old, and until her final day, she lived alone in that big Victorian house on Sycamore Lane in the Maple Grove district of Riverside. I dropped the towel I'd been holding and sat down hard on the bedroom floor. Grandma Dot had raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7. She'd been everything to me: mother, father, teacher, best friend. My sister Natalie had been only 4 at the time, too young to remember our parents clearly, so Grandma had been all she'd ever really known too. The funeral was small, held at the old chapel near the coast where Grandma had attended services every Sunday for 40 years. I wore the black dress Marcus had bought me for his company dinners, and I held his hand throughout the service, grateful for his steady presence beside me. Natalie sat on my other side, dabbing at her eyes with tissues, her perfectly manicured nails catching the light filtering through the stained glass windows. After the burial, we gathered at the law offices of Chen and Associates downtown for the reading of the will. Mr. Howard Chen, a silver-haired gentleman who'd handled Grandma's affairs for decades, gestured for us to sit in the leather chairs across from his mahogany desk. Marcus squeezed my hand as we settled in. Natalie checked her phone twice before Mr. Chen cleared his throat. The will was straightforward for most of it. Small bequests to the church, to a few old friends, to various charities Grandma had supported over the years. Then Mr. Chen adjusted his reading glasses and looked directly at me. To my beloved granddaughter Claire, I leave my home at 1247 Sycamore Lane, along with all its contents and the land upon which it stands. She has always understood what truly matters, and I trust she will know what to do with this gift. The silence in the office was absolute. I felt Marcus stiffen beside me. Natalie's head snapped up from her phone, her blue eyes wide with shock. To my granddaughter Natalie, I leave the sum of $5,000, with the hope that she will use it wisely and remember that true wealth cannot be measured in monetary terms alone. $5,000 versus an entire house. I saw the calculation happen behind Natalie's eyes, watched her face flush red, then pale. The house on Sycamore Lane sat on nearly 2 acres of land in what had once been Riverside's most prestigious neighborhood. Even in its current neglected state, the property had to be worth something substantial. That's it? Natalie's voice cut through the room like a blade. She gets the entire house and I get $5,000? Mr. Chen folded his hands on the desk. Your grandmother was very clear about her wishes, Miss Reed. The will is ironclad and was executed with full mental competency, witnessed by 3 separate individuals. This is ridiculous. Natalie stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Claire always was the favorite. Even now, even from the grave, she gets everything. Natalie, I started, reaching for her arm, but she jerked away from me. Don't. Just don't. She grabbed her designer purse and stormed out of the office, her heels clicking angrily down the hallway. I sat frozen in my chair, the words of the will still echoing in my mind. Marcus's hand had gone slack in mine, and when I turned to look at him, his expression was unreadable. Something cold flickered in his dark eyes before he blinked and replaced it with a smile that didn't quite reach his face. Well, that's quite an inheritance, he said carefully. A whole house. Mr. Chen handed me a thick envelope containing the deed, keys, and various documents related to the property. There are some things you should know about the house, Mrs. Dawson. It's been essentially vacant for the past year since your grandmother moved into assisted living. The property is in need of significant repairs. The roof leaks, the plumbing is outdated, and there are structural concerns that would need to be addressed before the house could be safely occupied or sold. How much are we talking about in repairs? Marcus asked, and I noticed he said we, as if the house belonged to both of us. Mr. Chen pulled out an inspection report. Conservatively, you're looking at upwards of $80,000 to make the property livable. Possibly more, depending on what else is discovered once work begins. The number hit me like cold water. $80,000. Marcus and I didn't have that kind of money sitting around. We'd stretched ourselves thin buying our house in Pinewood Estates, and Marcus's job in Portland, while decent, wasn't bringing in the kind of income that allowed for that level of unexpected expense. The drive home was quiet. Marcus kept his eyes on the road, his jaw tight. I stared out the window at the Oregon coastline sliding past, processing everything that had happened. I'd lost Grandma Dot, gained a house I couldn't afford to fix, and somehow become the villain in Natalie's story all in the span of a few days. When we pulled into our driveway, Marcus finally spoke. We should probably look at selling it. The house, I mean. Even as is, the land alone has to be worth something. We could use that money to pay off our mortgage, maybe take a real vacation for once. I don't know. The words came out softer than I intended. It was Grandma's house. Our house. Where we grew up. Claire, be realistic. Marcus turned off the engine and shifted to face me. It's a money pit. You heard Mr. Chen. 80 grand minimum just to make it livable. We don't have that. Nobody's going to buy it as is except for developers who'll tear it down and put up condos. The thought of bulldozers destroying the house where I'd learned to bake cookies, where Grandma had taught me to garden, where I'd spent countless evenings reading on the wraparound porch, made my chest ache. But Marcus was right. What else could we do? Let me at least go look at it first, I said. Before we make any decisions. I haven't been inside since Grandma moved out. Marcus sighed but nodded. Fine. We'll go this weekend. That night, I lay awake long after Marcus had fallen asleep beside me, listening to his steady breathing and thinking about Grandma Dot's will. She has always understood what truly matters, and I trust she will know what to do with this gift. What had she meant by that? What was I supposed to understand? The next morning, Marcus left early for his commute to Portland. He was a regional sales manager for a medical supply company, which meant long hours and frequent travel. I'd gotten used to having the house to myself during the week, filling my days with freelance graphic design work that I could do from home. My phone rang while I was making coffee. Natalie's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but guilt made me swipe to accept. I hope you're happy. Her voice was ice cold. Nat, I didn't know Grandma was going to do this. Of course you didn't. You never know anything, do you, Claire? Perfect little Claire who can do no wrong. Did you know Marcus called me last night? The coffee mug nearly slipped from my hands. What? He wanted to talk about the house. About the situation. He understands how unfair this is. A strange feeling settled in my stomach, something I couldn't quite name. Marcus had called Natalie? After we'd gotten home, after I'd gone to bed? I think we should talk about this properly, Natalie continued. The three of us. Marcus agrees that the inheritance should be split more fairly. After all, Grandma raised both of us. The three of us. Why would Marcus be involved in a conversation about splitting my inheritance with my sister? The house had been left to me specifically, not to us as a couple. Something about this felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. I need to go, I said abruptly. I'll call you later. I hung up before she could respond and stared at my phone, that strange feeling growing stronger. Marcus had seemed upset about the inspection report, about the cost of repairs, but why would he call Natalie about it? Why wouldn't he discuss it with me first if he had concerns? I tried calling Marcus, but his phone went straight to voicemail. He was probably in meetings. I left a message asking him to call me back, trying to keep my voice casual even though my hands were shaking. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I attempted to work on a logo design for a client, but I couldn't concentrate. My mind kept circling back to that phone call, to the way Natalie had said Marcus's name, to the strange undercurrent I'd sensed in her voice. By the time Marcus came home that evening, I'd worked myself into a state of anxious confusion. He walked in carrying takeout from our favorite Thai place, smiling like nothing was wrong. "I thought we could use a break from cooking," he said, setting the bags on the kitchen counter. "How was your day? Marcus, did you call Natalie last night?" His smile faltered for just a second before recovering. "Oh, that. Yeah, I just wanted to check on her. She was pretty upset yesterday. I thought maybe I could help smooth things over between you two. By talking about splitting my inheritance?" He pulled plates down from the cabinet, not meeting my eyes. "I didn't say split. I just said maybe we could work something out that would be fair to everyone. Claire, she's your sister. This is tearing your family apart. The house was left to me. Not to us, not to Natalie. To me. And as your husband, what's yours is ours, right?" Marcus finally looked at me, and there was something in his expression I'd never seen before. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Something that made me feel suddenly like a stranger in my own kitchen. We're married. We make decisions together about our assets. This isn't an asset. It's my grandmother's home, which is now worth probably $300,000 in land value alone, even with that wreck of a house on it. Marcus's voice had taken on an edge. We could sell it, split the money with Natalie to keep the peace, and still walk away with enough to change our lives. But instead, you're being sentimental about a house that's literally falling apart. The way he said sentimental made it sound like an insult. I stood there in our kitchen, the smell of pad thai filling the air, and felt the first hairline crack form in the foundation of my marriage. "I'm going to see the house this weekend," I said quietly. "After that, I'll decide what to do with it." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Fine. Do whatever you want." He grabbed his plate and walked into the living room, turning on the television loud enough that conversation was impossible. I ate dinner alone at the kitchen table, my appetite gone but forcing myself to swallow the food anyway. Through the doorway, I could see the back of Marcus's head, could hear him laughing at something on the screen. When had we become these people? When had he started making decisions about my life without including me? When had I become someone he called sentimental as a criticism? That night, I pulled out the envelope Mr. Chen had given me and studied the documents inside. The deed to 1247 Sycamore Lane, made out to Claire Marie Dawson. The keys, 3 of them on a tarnished brass ring. A letter in Grandma.'s spidery handwriting that I hadn't noticed before. "My dearest Claire," the letter began, and my eyes filled with tears at the familiar script. "If you're reading this, then I've moved on to whatever comes next, and you're holding the keys to more than just a house. You always saw beauty where others saw only work to be done. You understood that things of true value are worth fighting for, even when the path isn't easy. This house holds secrets I never shared, treasures I never showed, and possibilities I always believed in. Trust yourself, my darling girl. Trust what you know to be true, even when others try to convince you otherwise. The house will reveal what it needs to reveal when the time is right. All my love, always. Grandma. I read the letter 3 times, running my fingers over the words. Secrets. Treasures. Possibilities. What had Grandma meant? The house I remembered was beautiful in its bones but tired, worn down by decades and a lack of funds for proper maintenance. What secrets could possibly be hidden in peeling wallpaper and warped floorboards? But Grandma. Had never been cryptic without reason. Every story she told had a purpose, every lesson a point. If she said the house held secrets, then somewhere in that structure on Sycamore Lane, there was something she wanted me to find. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it back into the envelope. Marcus was still in the living room, still laughing at the television. I wondered if he'd even notice if I left. The thought made me sad in a way I couldn't fully articulate. Friday came faster than I expected. Marcus had been distant all week, leaving early and coming home late, barely speaking to me beyond the necessities of shared living. I tried to reach out, tried to start conversations about anything other than the house, but he shut me down each time with monosyllabic responses and turned shoulders. Are we still going to see the house tomorrow? I asked Friday night as he packed his briefcase for another early morning. He didn't look up. I can't. Something came up at work. You should go without me. Marcus, we planned this. You said we'd go together. And now I'm saying I can't. He snapped the briefcase shut. Just go take your pictures, get your nostalgic moment, and then we can talk seriously about selling it. Okay? The dismissiveness in his tone sparked something hot in my chest. This is important to me. Yeah, well, my job is important to me. Unlike your little design hobby that barely covers groceries. The words landed like a slap. My freelance work had been a mutual decision after we'd gotten married, something that gave me flexibility and creative fulfillment. He'd encouraged it, told me he loved that I could work from home. When had it become a little hobby in his mind? I'll go by myself then, I said, my voice flat. Great. Do that. Marcus grabbed his briefcase and headed for the bedroom without another word. I stood alone in the kitchen once more, that crack in our foundation widening into something that felt irreparable. Something was deeply wrong in my marriage, something that went beyond disagreements about inheritance and old houses. But I was too tired, too emotionally drained from grief and confusion, to examine it closely. Saturday morning dawned gray and drizzly, typical for coastal Oregon in early spring. I dressed in old jeans and a sweatshirt, pulled my dark blonde hair into a ponytail, and grabbed the keys to Sycamore Lane. Marcus was already gone by the time I left, though I had no idea where. Work on a Saturday seemed unlikely, but I didn't have the energy to question it. The drive to Maple Grove took 15 minutes through winding residential streets. The neighborhood had clearly seen better days. Houses that had once been grand now wore their age like ill-fitting clothes, porches sagging, paint peeling, yards overgrown. But there was still beauty here if you knew how to look for it. The old oak trees lining the streets, the architectural details that no modern builder would bother with, the sense of history in every brick and beam. 1247 Sycamore Lane sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, partially hidden behind overgrown hedges and a rusted iron gate. I parked on the street and stood for a long moment, just looking at the house I hadn't seen in over a year. It was worse than I remembered. The wraparound porch drooped on one corner, several spindles missing from the railing. The pale yellow paint had faded to something closer to gray, peeling away in long strips that revealed weathered wood beneath. Windows were dark and empty, a few cracked, one on the second floor boarded up. The yard was a jungle of unmowed grass, unpruned roses, and volunteer trees sprouting from the overgrown flower beds. But even in its decay, I could see what it had been. The tall windows with their original wavy glass. The intricate gingerbread trim along the roofline. The solid brick chimney rising 3 stories. The bones of something magnificent, just waiting for someone to remember its worth. I pushed through the gate, which squealed on hinges that hadn't been oiled in years, and walked up the cracked front path. The porch steps creaked ominously under my weight, and I made a mental note to step carefully. The front door was solid oak with an oval window of beveled glass, clouded with age but still beautiful. The first key didn't work. Neither did the second. The third one slid into the lock with a satisfying click, and the door swung open on silent hinges into darkness. The smell hit me first. Not the musty odor of abandonment I'd expected, but something cleaner, like lemon oil and old wood. Sunlight filtered through the dirty windows in dusty beams, illuminating a front hall that was frozen in time. The wallpaper, once a delicate pattern of roses and vines, hung in strips along the walls. The hardwood floor was covered in a layer of grime, but I could see the rich grain of oak beneath. I stepped inside carefully, leaving the door open behind me for light and fresh air. To my left was the formal parlor where Grandma used to serve tea to her church friends. The furniture was still there, draped in yellowed sheets like ghosts. To my right, the dining room with its massive table that had hosted every holiday dinner of my childhood. Straight ahead, the staircase curved up to the second floor, its banister carved with intricate scrollwork that must have taken months to complete. I walked through each room on the first floor, taking photos on my phone, trying to document the damage objectively even as memories assaulted me from every corner. The kitchen with its ancient stove where Grandma had taught me to make her famous blackberry cobbler. The breakfast nook where Natalie and I had done our homework while Grandma hummed and cooked dinner. The back sunroom where we'd played board games on rainy afternoons. Everything was shabby now, worn down by time and neglect. But underneath the decay, I could still see the craftsmanship. The hand-laid tile in the kitchen. The built-in cabinets with their original glass knobs. The window seats with storage underneath. This house had been built by people who cared about quality, about creating something that would last. I climbed the stairs slowly, testing each step before putting my full weight on it. The second floor held 4 bedrooms and a bathroom with a clawfoot tub that had probably been installed when indoor plumbing was still a luxury. My old room was at the front of the house, still painted the pale lavender Grandma had chosen for my 13th birthday. Natalie's room was next door, the walls a darker purple she'd insisted on when she turned 12. But it was Grandma's room that drew me. The master bedroom overlooked the backyard, with windows on 2 walls that would have flooded the space with light if they weren't so dirty. Her furniture was gone, moved to the assisted living facility and then sold after she passed. But the closet door stood open, and something made me walk over to look inside. The closet was deeper than I remembered, with built-in shelves and drawers along one wall. Most of them were empty, but in the back corner, behind where Grandma's winter coats would have hung, I noticed something odd. The wall didn't sit quite flush with the others. I ran my fingers along the seam and felt a slight give, like the panel wasn't properly attached. I pushed gently, and the panel swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a small space behind the wall. My heart hammered in my chest as I pulled out my phone and used the flashlight to peer inside. There, sitting on a narrow shelf, were 3 leather-bound journals and a metal lockbox. I carried everything to the window where the light was better and sat down on the dusty floor. The journals were old, the leather cracked and dry. I opened the first one and recognized Grandma Dot's handwriting, though it was firmer and more confident than the spidery script of her later years. The entries were dated, starting in 1962. Personal thoughts about her life, her marriage to my grandfather, observations about Riverside and its changes over the decades. I flipped through the pages, skimming, until a date caught my eye. April 1987. The year my parents died. The pain of losing my daughter and son-in-law is unbearable, Grandma had written. But I must be strong for Claire and little Natalie. They need stability now more than ever. I've made my decision about the house, though I know it will cause trouble eventually. Claire understands beauty and value in ways that Natalie never has. Even at 7 years old, Claire stops to admire flowers, asks questions about how things are made, wants to know the stories behind old things. Natalie only asks what things cost, whether they're valuable in dollars and cents. Perhaps that will change as she grows. Perhaps not. But I know which of them will truly appreciate what this house represents. What it contains. I sat back against the wall, my throat tight. Grandma had known, even then, that leaving the house to me would create a rift. She'd seen something in Natalie that worried her, something mercenary that I'd always tried to ignore in my sister. The second journal picked up in the early 2000s. More personal reflections, thoughts about aging, about watching her granddaughters grow up. But toward the end, the entries changed tone. I've hidden the documents in the safe place, an entry from 2019 read. Claire will find them when she's ready. The house has always had value beyond what anyone knew. When my father built this place in 1924, he did more than construct a home. He invested in Riverside's future in ways that wouldn't be understood for decades. The original deed papers are all there, along with the mineral rights documentation and the easement contracts. If Claire is reading this, if she's found these journals, then she knows, the house is worth far more than it appears. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise, my dear girl. Trust what you find. Trust yourself. Mineral rights. Easement contracts. My hands shook as I set down the journal and reached for the lockbox. It wasn't locked, despite its name. Inside were yellowed legal documents, some dating back nearly a century. I spread them out carefully on the floor, trying to make sense of the legal language. The original deed to the property, signed in 1924 by Theodore Reed, my great-great-grandfather. Multiple parcels of land, not just the lot the house sat on, but adjacent properties that had apparently been purchased and combined over the years. Mineral rights documentation that referenced something about underground water sources and potential commercial development. Easement contracts with the city of Riverside regarding access to those water sources. My phone rang, making me jump. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something made me accept the call. "Where are you?" His voice sounded strained, almost angry. "At the house. Where else would I be? You need to come home. Now." "Marcus, I just got here. I'm looking around, trying to assess what needs to be done." "Claire, come home. We need to talk." The tone in his voice sent ice down my spine. "About what?" "Just come home. Please. I'll be there in an hour." I hung up before he could say anything else and sat staring at the documents spread around me. Something was very wrong, and it went beyond disagreements about an old house. I could feel it in my bones, that intuition Grandma had always told me to trust. I took photos of every document, every page of the journals, everything in that hidden space. Then I carefully returned the originals to the lockbox, carried everything downstairs, and locked it in the trunk of my car. If Marcus wanted to talk, we'd talk. But these documents, whatever they meant, were staying with me. The drive home felt longer than it should have. I kept glancing at my phone, wondering if I should call Vanessa, my best friend since college. But what would I even say? "My husband is acting strange. I found mysterious documents in my dead grandmother's wall, and I think my sister hates me." It all sounded absurd even in my own head. Marcus's car was in the driveway when I pulled up. So was another vehicle I didn't recognize, a sleek silver sedan that screamed money. I parked on the street and walked slowly toward the house, dread building with each step. The front door opened before I reached it. Marcus stood there, his face flushed, his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. Behind him, I could see someone else in our living room. Someone with blonde hair and a designer dress. "Natalie. We need to talk," Marcus said again, but this time his voice was different. Defeated, maybe. Or guilty. I pushed past him into the house. Natalie stood by our couch, her arms crossed, her expression defiant. She'd been crying, I could tell from the smudged mascara, but her eyes were hard when they met mine. "What's going on?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Part of me had known since that phone call, since Marcus's strange behavior all week, since the way Natalie had said his name on the phone. "I think you should sit down," Marcus said. "I'll stand. Just tell me." They looked at each other, a glance that held too much familiarity, too much intimacy. My stomach turned over. "Claire," Natalie started, her voice taking on that wheedling tone she'd used since childhood when she wanted something. "This is really hard for me to say, but you deserve to know the truth." "The truth about what?" "About Marcus and me. We didn't mean for it to happen. It just did." The words hung in the air, incomprehensible at first. Then their meaning crashed over me like a wave, cold and suffocating. Marcus and Natalie. My husband and my sister. How long? The question came out remarkably steady, given that my entire world was tilting sideways. Does it matter? Marcus had the decency to look ashamed, at least. Yes. It matters. 6 months, Natalie said, lifting her chin. We've been seeing each other for 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies and betrayal. 6 months of Marcus kissing me goodbye in the morning and then driving to meet my sister. 6 months of Natalie calling me for coffee dates and sister time while sleeping with my husband. "I think I'm going to be sick," I said, and I wasn't sure if I meant it metaphorically or literally. "Claire, please understand." Marcus took a step toward me, and I held up my hand to stop him. We tried to fight it. But sometimes feelings just happen. You can't control who you fall in love with. Love. He loved her. My sister. The woman who'd shared a room down the hall from mine throughout our childhood, who I'd protected from bullies at school, who I'd helped with homework and boy problems and every crisis she'd manufactured over the years. I need you to leave, I said to Natalie. Get out of my house. Actually, Marcus cleared his throat. That's part of what we need to talk about. I think it would be better if you left. Just for a little while, until we can figure out living arrangements. Living arrangements. He wanted me to leave the house we'd bought together, the home I'd decorated and maintained, so he could move my sister into my place. No. The word came out flat and final. This is my house too. If anyone's leaving, it's you. Claire, be reasonable. Natalie's voice had that edge it got when she wasn't getting her way. We're trying to handle this like adults. Marcus and I are going to be together. We love each other. The least you could do is make this easy instead of being difficult about it. Make it easy. She wanted me to make it easy for them to destroy my marriage, my family, my entire life. Get out, I said again, this time looking directly at Marcus. Both of you. Get out of my house right now. We need to discuss the house on Sycamore Lane, Marcus said, and suddenly I understood. This wasn't just about confessing an affair. This was about the inheritance. The property that Marcus had spent all week trying to convince me to sell. The house that Natalie had been furious about losing. What about it? Marcus and I have been talking, Natalie said, moving closer to him, her hand sliding into his in a gesture that made me want to scream. We think the fair thing to do would be to sell it and split the money 3 ways. That way everyone benefits, and we can all move forward. 3 ways. They wanted me to give them my grandmother's house, the property Grandma had specifically left to me, so they could fund their new life together. No, I said simply. Claire, Marcus's voice took on that patronizing tone I'd heard so often this week. You're being emotional. Once you calm down and think about this rationally, you'll see that this is the best solution for everyone. The best solution for everyone would have been for you not to sleep with my sister. But since we're past that, the best solution for me is for both of you to leave. Now. You can't just throw me out, Marcus said, his face reddening. I live here too. This is my house. Then I'll leave. I grabbed my purse and car keys from where I'd dropped them by the door. You two can have each other and this house and your whole sordid little affair. But you're not getting Grandma's property. That was left to me, and it stays mine. We'll see what a lawyer says about that, Natalie called after me as I walked out the door. You're married. That makes it community property. I didn't respond. I just got in my car and drove, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles went white, tears finally streaming down my face as the shock wore off and the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. Marcus and Natalie. My husband and my sister. For 6 months, while I'd been working on my designs, cooking dinners, doing laundry, being a wife, he'd been with her. Every late night at work, every weekend business trip, every time he'd been distant or distracted, he'd been thinking about her. And Natalie. The little sister I'd raised alongside Grandma after our parents died. The girl I'd helped through middle school drama and high school heartbreak. The woman I'd stood beside at her college graduation, so proud of her accomplishments. She'd looked me in the eye over coffee dates and family dinners, all while betraying me in the worst way possible. I drove without destination, my tears making the road blur. Eventually, I found myself pulling into the parking lot of the Daily Grind, the coffee shop where Vanessa worked as a manager. I sat in the car for several minutes, trying to compose myself, trying to figure out how to explain this to anyone. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. We need to be adults about this. Come home so we can talk properly. I deleted it without responding. Another text came through, this time from Natalie. I'm sorry you're hurt, but you can't blame us for falling in love. Sometimes these things just happen. I blocked her number. Then I blocked Marcus's. Then I got out of the car and walked into the coffee shop on shaking legs. Vanessa took one look at my face and immediately told her assistant manager to cover for her. She steered me to a corner booth, brought me a cup of tea I didn't remember ordering, and sat down across from me with her dark eyes full of concern. What happened? So I told her. Everything. The funeral, the will, Marcus's strange behavior, finding the documents in the house, coming home to find him and Natalie together. The words poured out in a jumbled rush, and Vanessa listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finally fell silent, she reached across the table and took my hands. I'm going to say something, and I need you to really hear me. Okay? I nodded, not trusting my voice. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. This is not about you being inadequate or not enough or anything else your brain is probably trying to tell you right now. This is about two deeply selfish people who put their own desires above basic human decency. Do you understand me? I nodded again, tears spilling over. Second, you're not going back to that house tonight. You're staying with me. We'll go get your things tomorrow when Marcus is at work. Third, first thing Monday morning, you're calling a lawyer. And fourth, you're going to let me help you figure out what those documents mean, because I guarantee you that house is worth way more than anyone thinks, and that's why they're suddenly so interested in it. How do you know? Because your grandmother was one of the smartest women I ever met, and she didn't leave you a falling down house in a bad neighborhood out of spite for Natalie. She left you something valuable. We just need to figure out what. Vanessa's apartment was small but comfortable, a one-bedroom in downtown Riverside that she'd decorated with an artist's eye. She made up the couch for me, brought me an extra blanket, and sat with me while I cried until I had no tears left. That night, lying on Vanessa's couch in borrowed pajamas, I pulled out my phone and looked at the photos I'd taken of Grandma's documents. Mineral rights. Water sources. Easement contracts. What did it all mean? I opened my laptop and started researching, typing in phrases from the documents, trying to understand the legal language. Hours passed as I fell down one rabbit hole after another, learning about water rights in Oregon, about how mineral rights worked, about the history of Riverside's development. And slowly, gradually, a picture began to emerge that made my breath catch in my throat. The property Grandma had left me wasn't just a house on 2 acres. According to the original deed and the subsequent purchases, the land included underground water rights that extended far beyond the physical boundaries of the lot. In the 1920s, when the house was built, those rights hadn't meant much. But now, in a region facing increasing water scarcity, they were potentially worth millions. More than that, the easement contracts gave the city of Riverside access to those water sources, with payments structured to increase over time based on usage. Payments that, according to the documents, had been going into a trust account for decades. A trust account that was now mine. I sat up on the couch, my heart racing. This was what Grandma had meant. This was the value she'd known about, the secret the house held. Not just the structure itself, but the land beneath it, the water flowing through ancient aquifers, the legal rights that had been carefully preserved through generations. No wonder Marcus and Natalie were so eager to sell. If they'd done any research, if they'd seen these documents, they would know what I was just discovering. The house might be worth $300,000, but the complete property, with all its associated rights and trust funds, was worth 10 times that. Maybe more. I needed to talk to Mr. Chen first thing Monday morning. I needed to understand exactly what I'd inherited, what legal protections I had, and how to keep Marcus and Natalie from trying to claim any of it. But more than that, I needed to understand why Grandma had kept this secret for so long, why she'd hidden the documents instead of simply telling me about them. What had she been protecting me from? Or what had she been waiting for me to be ready to handle? Sleep was impossible after that. I spent the rest of the night researching, taking notes, building a picture of exactly what had been left to me. By the time dawn light started filtering through Vanessa's windows, I had the beginnings of a plan. Grandma had left me more than a house. She'd left me independence, security, and a future that didn't depend on anyone else's approval or support. All I had to do was claim it. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and steady rain, the kind of weather that matched my mood perfectly. Vanessa had already left for her early shift at the daily grind, leaving me alone in her apartment with my laptop, my phone, and a determination that felt new and unfamiliar in my chest. I called Mr. Chen's office the moment it opened at 8. His secretary, a pleasant woman named Joan, informed me that he had an opening at 10 if I could make it downtown. I told her I'd be there, then spent the next hour organizing all my photos and notes into a coherent presentation. The law offices of Chen and Associates occupied the third floor of a historic brick building near the waterfront. I'd been here just days ago for the will reading, but everything felt different now. Then, I'd been a grieving granddaughter, confused about an unexpected inheritance. Now, I was a woman fighting to protect what was rightfully mine from people who'd already taken too much. Mr. Chen rose from behind his desk when Joan showed me in, his expression shifting from professional courtesy to concern when he saw my face. "Mrs. Dawson, please sit down. How can I help you today? I need to understand exactly what my grandmother left me. All of it. Not just the house, but everything connected to the property." He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I was wondering when you'd come asking about that. Your grandmother made me promise not to volunteer the information unless you specifically requested it. She said you'd figure it out when you were ready. So there is more. Considerably more." Mr. Chen opened a thick file on his desk. "The property at 1247 Sycamore Lane is just the visible portion of what Dorothy Reed left you. The complete inheritance includes water rights extending through 6 adjoining parcels, mineral rights to underground aquifers, and a trust account that's been collecting easement payments from the city for the past 40 years. How much?" The question felt crass, but I needed to know. The trust account currently holds approximately $2.7 million. The water rights themselves, given the current market conditions and increasing scarcity issues, are valued at somewhere between $8 and $12 million. The house and land, even in its current condition, is worth at least $400,000. I sat back in the chair, my head spinning. Over $3 million sitting in a trust account, plus property rights worth potentially $12 million more. Grandma that had been quietly wealthy, and none of us had known. Why didn't she tell anyone? Mr. Chen pulled out a letter, this one addressed to him in Grandma's handwriting. "She anticipated you'd ask that. May I read you what she wrote?" "Please." He adjusted his glasses and began. "Howard, if Claire is in your office asking these questions, then she's discovered the documents I left for her. She'll want to know why I kept this secret, so here's what you can tell her: money changes people. I've watched it happen over and over throughout my life. People who were kind become greedy. People who were reasonable become suspicious. People who claim to love you suddenly see only dollar signs. I kept this quiet because I wanted to see who my granddaughters truly were without the influence of wealth. I wanted them to make their own choices, build their own characters, become their own people. Natalie showed me exactly who she was at that will reading, angry about $5,000 when she should have been grieving. Claire showed me who she was by every visit, every genuine conversation, every moment she chose love over convenience. The money is Claire's because I know she'll use it wisely. She'll see it as a tool, not a prize. She'll understand that real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts but in integrity, compassion, and strength of character. Tell her I'm proud of her. Tell her I always knew she'd be strong enough to handle this." My eyes burned with unshed tears. Grandma had known. She'd seen through Natalie's surface charm to the calculation underneath. She'd understood that revealing this wealth too soon would have corrupted everything. Mr. Chen set down the letter. "Now, what brought you here today? What's happened?" So I told him about the affair, about Marcus and Natalie's demand that I sell the property and split it 3 ways, about being forced out of my own home. His expression grew progressively grimmer as I spoke. "They have no legal claim to your inheritance," he said firmly when I finished. "Oregon is not a community property state. Assets inherited by one spouse remain separate property unless they're commingled with marital assets. As long as you haven't deposited any of the trust funds into joint accounts or used them to improve shared property, they belong solely to you." "What about the house I'm living in?" The one Marcus and I bought together? That will need to be addressed in divorce proceedings. But Mrs. Dawson, I strongly recommend you file first. Don't wait for them to make the first move. You file, you control the narrative, and you establish your position from strength rather than responding to their demands. Can you recommend a divorce attorney? The best in Riverside is Catherine Walsh. She's handled several high-asset divorces and she's excellent at protecting inherited wealth from being claimed as marital property. I'll call her office right now and see if she can fit you in this week. While Mr. Chin made the call, I stared out his window at the rain-soaked streets of downtown Riverside. Just 5 days ago, I'd stood in a cemetery burying my grandmother, my husband's hand in mine, believing my life was stable and secure. Now that life had shattered like glass, revealing something harder and clearer underneath. Catherine Walsh could see me Wednesday afternoon. Mr. Chin spent another hour walking me through the complete financial picture, explaining how the trust was structured, what ongoing income one could expect from the easement agreements, and what options I had for the property itself. The house needs significant repairs before it can be occupied or sold, he reminded me. However, given your financial position now, those repairs are entirely affordable. You could restore it and live there, convert it to a rental property, or even donate it for historic preservation if you chose. The value is primarily in the land and the water rights, not the structure itself. I want to restore it. The words came out before I'd fully formed the thought. I want to bring it back to what it was. Mr. Chin smiled. Your grandmother would have liked that. She loved that house, even when she could no longer maintain it properly. Walking out of his office, I felt like a different person than the one who'd walked in. The scared, betrayed wife who'd spent Saturday night crying on Vanessa's couch was still part of me, but she wasn't all of me anymore. There was something else emerging, something stronger and more certain. I drove back to Vanessa's apartment through the rain, my mind already planning. I needed to file for divorce. I needed to change all my passwords and secure my accounts. I needed to make sure Marcus couldn't access any of the inheritance. And I needed to start figuring out what restoring that house would actually require. Vanessa came home from work around 3, soaked from the rain despite her umbrella. She took one look at my face and grinned. You found out something good. Try $2.7 million in a trust account, plus water rights worth another $8 to $12 million. She dropped her purse. Are you serious? Completely serious. Grandma Dot was sitting on a fortune, and she left all of it to me. Vanessa let out a whoop and pulled me into a hug. Oh my God, Claire. Do you know what this means? It means I can afford a really good divorce attorney. It means you're free. You don't need Marcus, you don't need his permission or his approval, and you certainly don't need to split anything with Natalie. You can do whatever you want. The full weight of that truth settled over me. She was right. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely financially independent. I didn't need Marcus's income. I didn't need to worry about where I'd live or how I'd support myself. I had choices. That evening, I created a new email account and started changing passwords on everything, cutting Marcus off from any joint accounts we'd shared. I called the bank and arranged to open new accounts in my name only. I made a list of everything I needed to retrieve from the house on Pinewood Estates, planning to go get it all while Marcus was at work. Tuesday morning, Vanessa drove me to the house with her pickup truck. We brought boxes and moved quickly, taking only what was truly mine. My clothes, my computer equipment, my grandmother's photo albums that I'd kept on a shelf in the spare room. I left everything Marcus had bought, everything we'd chosen together. I wanted nothing that would tie me to that chapter of my life. I was loading the last box when a car pulled into the driveway. My heart sank when I recognized it. Natalie's silver sedan. She got out looking polished and confident in a sleek black pantsuit, her blonde hair perfectly styled. Claire, we need to talk. No, we don't. I lifted the box into the truck bed. She followed me up the driveway. You can't just ignore this situation. We're still family. I spun around so fast she took a step back. Family doesn't sleep with family's husbands, Natalie. Family doesn't scheme to steal inheritances. You stopped being my family the moment you betrayed me. Her face flushed red. I didn't steal anything. You're being selfish about that house. Grandma would have wanted us to share. Grandma left it to me specifically because she knew exactly who you are. The words came out cold and clear. She saw your greed, your selfishness, your obsession with money over everything else. That's why you got $5,000 and I got everything. Natalie's eyes narrowed. What do you mean, everything? Exactly what I said. But you'll never know the details because you'll never touch a penny of it. Marcus has rights, she said, her voice taking on a desperate edge. You're married. He's entitled to half of whatever you inherited. Actually, he's not. Oregon law is very clear about inherited assets. They remain separate property. I had a lawyer explain it to me yesterday. The color drained from her face. You talked to a lawyer? First thing Monday morning. I'm filing for divorce on Wednesday. Marcus will get half of the house here in Pinewood Estates and half of our shared savings account. Everything Grandma left me stays mine. You can't do this. Watch me. Vanessa appeared at my elbow. Everything loaded, Claire. We should go. We left Natalie standing in the driveway, her expression caught between rage and panic. As we drove away, I watched her in the side mirror, already pulling out her phone. Calling Marcus, probably, to tell him their plan had failed. That afternoon, I met with a contractor Vanessa recommended, a man named Daniel Foster who specialized in historic home restoration. He agreed to meet me at the Sycamore Lane property to assess what would be needed. Daniel was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with dark hair and calloused hands that spoke of someone who actually did the work rather than just managing it. He walked through the house slowly, taking photos, making notes, occasionally poking at questionable boards or testing window frames. When we finished the tour, we stood on the front porch looking out at the overgrown yard. This is a beautiful house underneath all the neglect, he said. Whoever built it knew what they were doing. These bones are solid. Can it be saved? Absolutely. It'll take time and money, but yes. The real question is what you want to do with it. Restore it exactly as it was? Modernize the interior while keeping the historic exterior? Convert it to something else entirely? I want it to be a home again. The way it was when I was growing up here. But functional for modern living. Updated kitchen and bathrooms, but keeping all the original character. Daniel smiled. That's my favorite kind of project. Give me a few days to work up a detailed estimate, but based on what I saw, you're looking at somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000 for a full restoration. The number that would have been impossible a week ago now felt manageable. Do it. Whatever it takes to bring this house back. We shook hands, and as Daniel walked back to his truck, I stood on that sagging porch and looked at the house with new eyes. This wasn't just a building. It was Grandma's gift, her faith in me, her final lesson about knowing my own worth. Wednesday's appointment with Catherine Walsh confirmed what Mr. Chen had told me. My inheritance was protected. Marcus had no claim to it. The divorce would be straightforward, though likely contentious given his personality. Catherine recommended I stay away from the Pinewood Estates house, avoid all contact with Marcus and Natalie, and let her handle all communication. Have you thought about where you'll live during the restoration? Catherine asked. It could take 3 to 6 months depending on what they find once they start opening walls. I'll stay with my friend for now. Once the house is livable, I'll move in there. And after that? What are your long-term plans? I hadn't thought that far ahead. But sitting in Catherine's office, looking out at the rainy streets of Riverside, I realized I could do anything. Go anywhere. Be anyone. The inheritance had given me more than money. It had given me freedom. I think I'll stay in Riverside, I said slowly. This is home. But I want to do something meaningful with the house. Something that would have made Grandma proud. Catherine smiled. You've got time to figure it out. For now, Focus on taking care of yourself and let me handle the legal battles. Over the next 2 weeks, I established a new routine. Mornings at Vanessa's apartment, working on my design projects. Afternoons at the Sycamore Lane house, meeting with Daniel and his crew as they began the restoration work. Evenings researching possibilities, dreaming about what the house could become. Daniel's crew started with the structural issues, shoring up the sagging porch, replacing rotted boards, fixing the roof. As they worked, I watched the house slowly come back to life. It was like watching someone recover from a long illness, gaining strength day by day. Marcus tried calling from different numbers when he realized I'd blocked him. He sent emails that Catherine forwarded to me with terse summaries. He's threatening to contest the divorce unless you agree to split the inheritance. He claims you've been hiding assets. Standard intimidation tactics. Ignore them. Natalie showed up at the house one afternoon while I was there with Daniel. She parked across the street and sat in her car for 20 minutes before finally driving away. The next day, she sent a long text to my new number that Vanessa had given me for emergencies. Pages of justification about how she and Marcus were soulmates, how I should be happy for them, how families should support each other, how Grandma would have wanted me to share the wealth. I deleted it without reading past the first paragraph. The truth was, their betrayal hurt less with each passing day. Not because I'd forgiven them, but because I was building something new, something that had nothing to do with either of them. Every board Daniel's crew replaced, every window they restored, every wall they repaired felt like shedding another layer of the person I'd been when I was married to Marcus. That person had been smaller, quieter, more accommodating. She'd bent herself into shapes that pleased others, convinced that making herself less would somehow make her more lovable. But Grandma's gift had shown me the truth. I didn't need to shrink to fit into someone else's vision of who I should be. I could be exactly who I was, and that was enough. 3 weeks into the restoration, Daniel called me with unexpected news. "Claire, we found something when we opened up the wall in the dining room. You need to come see this." I drove to the house immediately, my heart pounding. Daniel met me at the door, his expression somewhere between excited and confused. Behind the wall, hidden in the space between studs, we found more documents. Letters, actually, and photographs. They were sealed in waterproof containers, preserved perfectly despite the decades. We spread them out on the newly refinished dining room floor. Letters from my great-great-grandfather Theodore, explaining his vision for the house and the land. Photographs of Riverside from the 1920s, showing the property in its original glory. And a final letter from Grandma. Dated just 6 months before she died. "Dearest Claire," this letter began. "If you're reading this, you've begun restoring the house, which means you've chosen to honor the past while building toward the future. That's exactly what I hoped you'd do. This house was built with love and vision. Your great-great-grandfather Theodore saw potential where others saw empty land. He invested not just money but hope, believing Riverside would grow into something special. He was right, though he didn't live to see it fully realized. Now it's your turn to see potential, to invest hope, to believe in possibilities others might miss. The house is yours to do with as you wish, but I've always imagined it as a gathering place, somewhere that brings people together and creates community the way it did when you and Natalie were young. Whatever you decide, know that I'm proud of you. Know that you have the strength and wisdom to make the right choice. All my love, always and forever, Grandma. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. A gathering place. Somewhere that creates community. An idea began to form, hazy at first but gaining clarity with each passing moment. "Daniel," I said slowly, "how difficult would it be to convert this house into a bed and breakfast?" He looked around the dining room, his eyes calculating. "Not difficult at all, actually. You've got the space, the location's good once the neighborhood rebounds, and the historic character would be a major selling point. You'd need to add more bathrooms, maybe reconfigure some of the bedrooms, but the bones are perfect for it. That's what I want to do. Not just restore it as a home, but transform it into something that serves the community. A place where people can experience the history and beauty of this house." Daniel grinned. Then let's make it happen. That night, lying on Vanessa's couch, I started sketching plans. Not just for the physical restoration, but for what the business could be. The Riverside Inn, maybe, or the Reed House. A bed and breakfast that honored Grandma's vision while creating something sustainable and meaningful. For the first time since the funeral, I felt genuinely excited about the future. Not just relieved or determined, but actually looking forward to what came next. I'd lost my husband and my sister, but I'd found something more valuable, myself. The divorce papers arrived at Marcus's office on a Thursday afternoon in late April. Catherine called me with barely suppressed satisfaction in her voice to report that he'd been served at work, in front of his colleagues, just as she'd planned. Strategic humiliation, she called it. A reminder that he no longer controlled the narrative. His response came within hours. A barrage of text messages from yet another new number, each one angrier than the last. Threats about what his lawyer would do, accusations that I'd been planning this all along, claims that I'd manipulated Grandma into leaving everything to me. I forwarded them all to Catherine without responding and blocked the number. The restoration work progressed faster than expected. Daniel's crew had uncovered surprisingly solid infrastructure beneath the decades of neglect. The house wanted to be saved, Daniel said one afternoon, running his hand along an exposed beam. Sometimes you can tell. Some buildings have just given up, but this one's fighting to come back. I spent most of my days there now, watching the transformation unfold. The wraparound porch had been rebuilt with boards that matched the original lumber. The windows had been restored, their wavy glass cleaned until it sparkled. The roof no longer leaked, and inside, room by room, the house was remembering what it had once been. Vanessa came by on her days off, bringing coffee and enthusiasm. She'd been researching bed and breakfast regulations, permit requirements, and hospitality management. I think you should aim for 5 guest rooms, she said, spreading papers across the refinished kitchen counter. Keep it intimate. Quality over quantity. And this kitchen is perfect for serving breakfast. Just needs commercial-grade appliances and you're set. I'd hired an interior designer, a woman named Patricia Chen who specialized in historic properties. She understood immediately what I wanted: honor the past while creating comfort for the present. Period-appropriate furniture with modern amenities hidden discreetly behind antique facades. Bathrooms that looked vintage but functioned with contemporary efficiency. The budget I'd been so worried about barely made a dent in the trust account. Even with Daniel's crew working full-time, even with Patricia's carefully curated furniture selections, even with all the permits and inspections and unexpected discoveries that always came with old houses, I was spending less than $500,000. The inheritance was so substantial that I could afford to do everything right, to refuse shortcuts, to insist on quality. In early May, Marcus's lawyer filed a motion demanding full financial disclosure of my inheritance. Catherine responded with documentation proving every dollar had been inherited separately and was therefore exempt from marital property division. The judge agreed, denying Marcus's motion and awarding me full control of all assets inherited from Grandma. I didn't gloat. I didn't call Marcus to tell him he'd lost. I simply continued working on the house, building something that had nothing to do with him or Natalie or the life I'd left behind. But they wouldn't let go quietly. One evening in mid-May, I was at the house alone, going over paint samples with Patricia, when someone started pounding on the front door. Patricia and I exchanged glances. The door wasn't locked since contractors were still coming and going, but the aggressive knocking sent alarm bells through my system. I opened the door to find Marcus standing on the newly restored porch, his face flushed with anger and something that looked like desperation. He'd lost weight, I noticed distantly. His suit hung loose on his frame, and his hair needed cutting. "You can't just shut me out," he said, his voice rough. 5 years of marriage, Claire. That has to count for something. It would have counted for a lot if you hadn't been sleeping with my sister. I kept my voice level, aware of Patricia hovering nervously in the hallway behind me. That was a mistake. Marcus took a step forward, and I instinctively stepped back. We both made mistakes. But throwing away our entire marriage over one mistake? That's not who you are. You're right. I'm not someone who throws away marriages. But you are. You threw it away the first time you touched Natalie. His expression twisted. You're being vindictive. This house, the money, refusing to negotiate. You're trying to punish me. I'm trying to move on with my life. There's a difference. By keeping everything for yourself? By refusing to even discuss a fair settlement? His voice rose, echoing off the newly painted walls. I helped you through your grief when your grandmother died. I supported you. I deserve something for that. The audacity of it stole my breath. You helped me through grief? You were planning to steal my inheritance before we'd even buried her. That's not what happened, he said, but his eyes shifted away from mine. Marcus, you called Natalie the night of the funeral. You discussed splitting the house before you even knew what it was worth. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this was about love or mistakes or anything other than greed. Natalie appeared at the bottom of the porch steps, and I realized they'd come together. She looked worse than Marcus, her usual polish replaced by something harder and more desperate. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her designer clothes hung on a frame that had grown thin. Claire, please, she said, climbing the steps. We need to talk about this like adults. I have nothing to say to you. I'm your sister. You can't just cut me out of your life forever. Watch me. I started to close the door, but Marcus put his hand on it, preventing it from shutting. We know about the water rights, he said. We know the property's worth millions. You can't keep it all and pretend you're the victim here. Patricia appeared at my elbow, her phone in her hand. I've called the police, she said quietly. They're on their way. The words had an immediate effect. Marcus dropped his hand from the door. Natalie took a step back. But neither of them left. You were never supposed to have all this, Natalie said, and her voice carried years of accumulated resentment. Everything always went to you. Grandma's attention, her love, and now her money. What about me? What did I ever get? $5,000 and a lesson about who you really are. Now get off my property before the police arrive and I press charges for trespassing. We left, but the encounter shook me more than I wanted to admit. Patricia stayed until the police arrived and I'd filed a report. Daniel showed up 20 minutes later, summoned by Patricia's call, and insisted on checking all the locks and windows before he'd leave me alone. You should stay somewhere else tonight, he said. Just to be safe. But I was tired of running, tired of letting Marcus and Natalie dictate my actions even indirectly. I'm staying. This is my house. They don't get to chase me away from it. Daniel nodded slowly. Then I'm staying too. I'll sleep on the couch downstairs. Just until we're sure they're not coming back. I should have argued, should have insisted I was fine, but the truth was I felt safer with someone else in the house. We ordered pizza, and Daniel shared stories about other restoration projects while we ate. He had a way of making even disaster stories funny, finding humor in burst pipes and collapsed ceilings and the time he discovered a family of raccoons living in an attic. As the evening darkened into night, we sat on the front porch in the chairs Daniel's crew had built to match the originals. The neighborhood was quiet, the houses around us dark. Most of them were still vacant, waiting for Riverside's slow revitalization to reach this forgotten corner. Why did you decide to restore this house? Daniel asked. With the money you have, you could have done anything. Gone anywhere. Because it matters. I watched fireflies beginning their dance in the overgrown yard. Because Grandma trusted me to see the value in things other people overlook. Because I wanted to prove I could build something meaningful instead of just consuming what others built for me. That's a good answer. What about you? Why historic restoration instead of new construction? Daniel was quiet for a moment, his face thoughtful in the dim porch light. My grandfather was a craftsman. A real one, the old-school kind who could build anything with his hands. He taught me that things built with care and skill deserve to be preserved. That there's honor in maintaining what previous generations created. New construction is fine, but restoration is remembering. It's saying that the past has value, that the people who came before us mattered. The words resonated with something deep in my chest. That's exactly what this is. Remembering. Honoring. Making sure Grandma's vision doesn't disappear. We sat in comfortable silence after that, watching the fireflies and listening to the night sounds of Riverside. For the first time since Marcus's confession, I felt genuinely peaceful. Not just determined or strategic, but actually content. Daniel kept his word and slept on the couch downstairs while I took one of the nearly finished guest rooms on the second floor. I woke to the smell of coffee and found him in the kitchen, having already brewed a pot using the new coffee maker. No sign of trouble, he reported. I walked the perimeter this morning. Everything's secure. Thank you. For staying. For caring. He smiled, and I noticed for the first time how warm his eyes were. That's what friends do, Claire. Friends. The word felt significant somehow, like a door opening to possibilities I hadn't considered. After Daniel left to check on another project, I spent the morning working with Patricia on final design choices. The house was nearly complete now, at least the major work. Just finishing touches remained: light fixtures, artwork, linens for the guest rooms, dishes for the kitchen. Catherine called around noon with news. The divorce was proceeding smoothly. Marcus had finally accepted that he had no claim to the inheritance and was negotiating in good faith about splitting the Pinewood Estates house and the shared savings. We should be able to finalize everything within 2 months. What about Natalie? I asked. Has she tried anything legally? Her lawyer sent a letter suggesting you had unduly influenced your grandmother. Catherine's tone suggested what she thought of that argument. I responded with copies of Dorothy's letters explaining her reasoning, plus Mr. Chen's documentation of her mental competency. We haven't heard back, and I don't expect to. They have no case. After the call ended, I walked through the house slowly, seeing it with fresh eyes. The parlor with its restored fireplace and period furniture. The dining room where Grandma's table would soon sit, ready for breakfast service. The sunroom that had been converted to a guest lounge. The kitchen that gleamed with new appliances hidden in vintage cabinetry. Upstairs, the 5 guest rooms were each unique, decorated with antiques Patricia had sourced from estate sales and auctions. The master bedroom, Grandma's old room, I'd kept for myself. It would be my private space, separate from the business, a reminder of why I'd done all this. In late June, the final inspections were completed. The house at 1247 Sycamore Lane was officially certified for commercial use as a bed and breakfast. I stood in the front hall with Daniel, Patricia, Vanessa, and Mr. Chen, all of whom had become integral to making this vision real, and felt tears streaming down my face. Your grandmother would be so proud, Mr. Chen said quietly. The grand opening was scheduled for August 1st. Vanessa had created a website and social media presence. Patricia had arranged for a photographer to capture the restored house in all its glory. Daniel had built a discreet sign for the front yard: the Reed House, established 1924, restored 2024. I'd hired a small staff, a part-time cook who specialized in farm-to-table breakfast cuisine, a housekeeper with experience in historic properties, and a local college student to help with guest services on weekends. Vanessa had agreed to handle the business side, managing reservations and finances, while I focused on hospitality and maintaining the property. The first reservations started coming in immediately after the website launched. History enthusiasts drawn by the Victorian architecture. Couples looking for romantic weekend getaways. Families wanting to experience coastal Oregon in comfort. Within 2 weeks, we were booked solid through October. July passed in a blur of final preparations. Training staff, stocking the kitchen, setting up systems for check-in and check-out, creating guidebooks for guests about Riverside attractions. I moved into the master bedroom permanently, leaving Vanessa's couch behind with gratitude for her generosity but relief at having my own space again. The divorce was finalized on July 20th. I signed the papers in Catherine's office, officially ending my marriage to Marcus. He got the Pinewood Estates house and half the savings. I got my freedom and everything Grandma had left me. The hearing took less than 30 minutes. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because the marriage was over, but because I'd proven I could survive its ending. I'd taken the worst betrayal of my life and transformed it into something beautiful and lasting. That evening, I sat on the front porch of the Reed house, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. Daniel pulled up in his truck, having promised to fix a squeaky hinge on one of the guest room doors before opening day. "You did it," he said, settling into the chair beside me. "Built something amazing from ruins. We did it. I couldn't have done this without you." He was quiet for a moment, then turned to look at me directly. "Claire, I need to tell you something. When I first took this job, it was just another restoration project. Good money, interesting work. But somewhere along the way, it became more than that. You became more than just a client." My heart started beating faster. Daniel had been a constant presence for months, but I'd been so focused on the house, on healing, on building my new life, that I hadn't let myself think about what his steady support might mean. "I'm not asking for anything," he continued. "I know you're just getting out of a marriage, that you need time. But I wanted you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd like to take you to dinner. Not as your contractor or your friend, but as someone who thinks you're remarkable and wants to know you better." The words settled over me like a warm blanket. Not demanding, not pressuring, just honest and open. The opposite of Marcus's manipulation, of Natalie's calculation. "I'd like that," I said. "Maybe after opening weekend, when things settle down a bit." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "That sounds perfect." The night before the grand opening, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house in the darkness, running my hands along the restored woodwork, remembering every challenge we'd overcome to get here. Grandma's presence felt close, like she was walking beside me, proud and pleased. I found myself in what had been her bedroom, looking out at the backyard where someday I'd restore the gardens she'd loved. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the overgrown grass and wild roses. "Thank you," I whispered to the night air, to Grandma's memory, to whatever force had guided me through these impossible months. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for the gift. Thank you for teaching me to see value where others saw only waste." A car pulled up outside, and my heart jumped before I recognized it as Daniel's truck. He got out, looking up at the house until he spotted me in the window. I hurried downstairs, opening the door to find him on the porch with a sheepish expression. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Kept thinking about that hinge. Wanted to make sure it was perfect for tomorrow." "It's midnight." "I know. But this matters. You matter." We worked together in the quiet house, Daniel fixing the hinge while I adjusted curtains and straightened already straight pillows. Neither of us spoke much, but the silence felt comfortable, companionable. When he finally left, the sky was just beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Opening day was here, and I was ready. August 1st dawned clear and warm, the kind of perfect summer day that made coastal Oregon feel like paradise. I was up before sunrise, checking every room one final time, making sure every detail was flawless. Fresh flowers in each guest room. Towels folded precisely on the bathroom racks. Coffee and tea stations stocked and ready. Our first guests were scheduled to arrive at 2 in the afternoon. A couple from Seattle celebrating their 30th anniversary, drawn by the photos of the restored Victorian and the promise of quiet elegance. I'd spoken with them twice on the phone, and they seemed genuinely excited about being our inaugural visitors. Vanessa arrived at 8 with pastries from the Daily Grind and a bottle of champagne. "For after the first successful check-in," she said, setting both on the kitchen counter. "You're going to do great today, Claire. This place is magic." The morning passed in a blur of last-minute preparations. The cook, a talented woman named Helen, arrived to prep for tomorrow's breakfast service. She'd planned a menu of fresh berry crepes, locally sourced bacon, and her signature herb frittata. The housekeeper, Maria, did a final sweep of all the rooms, her practiced eye-catching details I'd missed. At 1:30, Daniel's truck pulled into the driveway. He'd promised to stay away on opening day, not wanting to intrude, but apparently he'd changed his mind. He got out carrying a wrapped package and wearing a nervous smile. "I know I said I'd give you space today, but I couldn't stay away." He handed me the package. "Consider it a grand opening gift." Inside was a carved wooden sign, smaller than the one in the front yard. "The Reed House," it read, with ornate scrollwork around the edges. Below that, in smaller letters, "Built with love, restored with hope." My eyes filled with tears. "Daniel, this is beautiful. Every great building needs a motto." I thought this one fit. We hung it in the front hall, right where guests would see it when they walked in. The words felt like a benediction, a reminder of everything this journey had meant. The Seattle couple, Thomas and Linda Morrison, arrived exactly on time. They pulled up in a pristine classic Mercedes, and I watched from the window as they got out and looked at the house with expressions of wonder. "Oh, Thomas," Linda breathed as I opened the front door. "It's even more beautiful in person." I gave them the tour, showing them the parlor and dining room, the guest lounge and the sunroom, before leading them upstairs to their room. I'd given them the largest suite, the one that overlooked the garden with its own sitting area and renovated bathroom. "This is perfect," Thomas said, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "Absolutely perfect." After they were settled, I retreated to the kitchen where Vanessa was setting up the guest refreshment area with cookies and lemonade. "You're a natural at this," she said. "The hospitality thing. It suits you." The afternoon passed peacefully. Thomas and Linda went for a walk around the neighborhood, then returned to sit on the porch with books and glasses of wine. They fit into the house like they belonged there, and watching them, I felt a deep sense of rightness about what I'd created. Evening came softly, the summer light lingering long past dinner. I was in the kitchen reviewing the next day's schedule when the doorbell rang. Odd, since we weren't expecting anyone else until tomorrow. I walked to the front door and opened it without thinking. Marcus stood on the porch. He looked terrible. The weight loss was more pronounced, and there was something defeated in his posture that I'd never seen before. He held an envelope in one hand and his eyes were red-rimmed. "Claire, please. Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I should have slammed the door. Should have called the police. But something in his expression stopped me. This wasn't the angry, entitled Marcus from the last confrontation. This was someone who'd been broken. 5 minutes, I said, stepping out onto the porch and closing the door behind me. "Talk." He handed me the envelope. Inside were official-looking documents. I scanned them quickly, my heart sinking as I understood what I was reading. "Natalie's pregnant," he said before I could ask. 3 months along. She told me last week. The news should have hurt more than it did. My sister, carrying my ex-husband's child. But instead of pain, I felt only a distant sadness for the child who would be born into such dysfunction. "Congratulations," I said flatly. "It's not what I wanted." His voice cracked. "None of this is what I wanted. I thought I was in love with her, Claire. I thought she was exciting and fresh and everything you weren't. But I was wrong. So completely wrong. Marcus, why are you here?" "Because I need you to know the truth. Natalie and I, it wasn't about love. It was about the house, about the money. She approached me first, weeks before your grandmother died. She'd heard Grandma was changing her will, and she wanted to make sure we could contest it together if you got everything." The words landed like stones. Natalie had planned this before Grandma even passed. She'd seduced my husband as part of a scheme to steal my inheritance. We started meeting to discuss strategy, and somewhere along the way it became physical. I convinced myself it was real, that we had something special. But after you left, after you filed for divorce, everything fell apart. Without the money she thought she'd get, Natalie changed completely. She became demanding, angry, desperate. When she told me about the baby, she said I had to marry her, that I owed her that much. So marry her. I kept my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "I can't. I don't love her. I'm not even sure I like her anymore. He looked up at me, and his eyes were pleading. I made a terrible mistake, Claire. The worst mistake of my life. I destroyed our marriage for something that was never real. And now I'm trapped. You're not trapped. You made choices. Now you get to live with them. I know. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I needed you to understand that I didn't leave you because you weren't enough. You were always enough. More than enough. I left because I was greedy and stupid, and I let your sister manipulate me into thinking I deserved more than I had. The envelope he'd given me contained evidence. Text messages between him and Natalie from before Grandma died, discussing the will, planning how to convince me to split the inheritance. Emails with real estate agents about the property value. A contract Natalie had drawn up outlining how they divide the profits. She kept all this? I asked, incredulous. I found it on her laptop. I think she was planning to use it as leverage if I tried to leave her. But I don't care anymore. I wanted you to have it. To know that you were right about everything. I folded the documents carefully and slid them back into the envelope. Thank you for telling me. But Marcus, it doesn't change anything. We're divorced. That chapter is over. I know. I just needed you to hear it from me. That I'm sorry. That you deserved better. That watching you build this place, create something beautiful from nothing, it made me realize what I threw away. He turned to leave, then paused at the top of the steps. You're going to be happy here, Claire. You already are. I can see it. And I'm glad for you, even though I hate that I'm not part of it. I watched him walk to his car, this man I'd once loved enough to marry. The anger I'd carried for months had dissolved into something softer. Not forgiveness exactly, but release. He was no longer my problem to solve, my burden to carry. Inside, I found Daniel waiting in the kitchen. He must have come in through the back door while I was on the porch. I heard voices, he said. Wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I showed him the documents Marcus had brought, explained what they contained. Daniel's expression grew darker as he read, his jaw tightening. This is evidence of fraud, conspiracy. You could press charges. I could. But I won't. I slid the envelope into a drawer. It's over. They're miserable, and that's punishment enough. I'm not going to waste any more energy on them. That's generous of you. It's not generosity. It's self-preservation. Every minute I spend thinking about them is a minute I'm not spending building something good. Daniel pulled me into a hug, and I let myself lean into his solid warmth. The contrast between this embrace and any touch from Marcus was striking. Daniel's arms felt safe, comfortable, like coming home. The weekend passed in a warm blur of satisfied guests, successful breakfast service, and the deep satisfaction of seeing my vision come to life. Thomas and Linda checked out Sunday afternoon with promises to leave glowing reviews and return for their next anniversary. 2 more couples arrived to replace them, and by Sunday evening, the Reed house was running smoothly. Monday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Mr. Chen appeared at the door wearing his usual immaculate suit, carrying a briefcase and smiling warmly. Mrs. Dawson, I hope I'm not intruding. I have some news that couldn't wait. We sat in the parlor, and he pulled documents from his briefcase. The city of Riverside has made an offer to purchase your water rights. Not all of them, but a significant portion. They want to develop a new municipal water system to support growth in the region, and your aquifer access is critical to their plans. How much are they offering? $11 million for a 60-year lease on the primary water sources, with annual payments of $200,000 for continued access. You'd retain ownership but grant them extraction rights within specified limits. The number was staggering. Combined with what I already had, this would make me independently wealthy for life. But more than that, it would ensure the water that flowed beneath Grandma's land would serve the community, would help Riverside grow and thrive. What would Grandma have wanted? I asked. Mr. Chen smiled. She included a provision in her papers anticipating this possibility. In the event of municipal interest, she wrote that you should prioritize community benefit over maximum profit. She trusted your judgment to find the right balance. The negotiations took 3 weeks. I insisted on environmental protections, limits on extraction to prevent aquifer depletion, and a clause that guaranteed affordable water rates for low-income residents. The city agreed to all of it, and we signed the final contract in late August. The Reed House flourished through the late summer and into autumn. Word spread through travel blogs and hospitality websites about the beautifully restored Victorian in Riverside. We were booked solid through the holidays, and I'd already started a waiting list for next spring. Vanessa moved into a newly renovated apartment in town, finally able to afford her own space thanks to her salary as business manager. Maria's daughter joined the staff as a weekend receptionist. Helen's breakfasts became locally famous, with guests raving about her creative menus. And Daniel became a constant presence in my life. Not as a contractor anymore, but as something that felt increasingly like a partner. We had dinner together most evenings after guests were settled. We took walks through the neighborhood, watching as other historic homes slowly began their own restoration journeys, inspired by the Reed House's transformation. In October, 6 months after that terrible Saturday when I discovered Marcus and Natalie's betrayal, Daniel and I were sitting on the porch watching autumn leaves drift across the lawn. The evening was cool, the first real hint of the coming winter. "I've been thinking," Daniel said, his hand finding mine. "About permanence. About building things that last." My heart started beating faster. "What kind of things?" "The kind that require foundations. Commitment. 2 people working together toward a shared vision." He turned to face me fully, and his expression was open and hopeful. "I'm not Marcus. I won't make promises I can't keep or pretend to be something I'm not. But I can promise that I see you, Claire. Not what you can give me or what you're worth, but who you are. And I'd like the chance to build something with you. Not just houses or businesses, but a life." The tears came without warning, but they were good tears. Healing tears. "Yes," I said simply. "Yes, I'd like that too." We kissed there on the porch, the same porch where Grandma had taught me to look for beauty in small things, where I'd spent countless childhood evenings dreaming about the future. The house seemed to approve, settling around us with creaks and sighs that sounded content. November brought an unexpected encounter. I was downtown picking up supplies when I saw Natalie across the street. She was visibly pregnant now, her designer clothes replaced by more practical maternity wear. She looked tired and alone, standing in front of a shop window with her hand on her swollen belly. Our eyes met across the traffic. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then, slowly, she crossed the street toward me. "Claire," she said, and her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I know you don't want to talk to me. I know I don't deserve it. But I need to say something." I waited, not offering encouragement but not walking away either. "I was wrong. About everything. The way I treated you, the choices I made, the person I became. I told myself I was just claiming what should have been mine, but the truth is I was jealous. Of how Grandma looked at you. Of how you always seemed to know who you were while I was constantly trying to prove something." She took a shaky breath. "Marcus told me he gave you the documents. That you know it was planned from the beginning." "I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't think I deserve that. But I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Truly, genuinely sorry. And I hope someday, maybe years from now, there might be a way for us to start over. Not as we were, but as something new." I looked at this woman who'd been my sister, who'd shared my childhood and my grief and my life. The anger I'd carried had burned away months ago, leaving only sadness for what we'd lost and what we'd never been. "I hope you find happiness, Natalie. Real happiness, not the kind that depends on taking from someone else." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm trying. It's harder than I thought it would be. Being a good person usually is. We parted without touching, without promises of future reconciliation. But something had shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever. But release. The cord of bitterness that had tied me to her betrayal finally severed, setting us both free. Christmas at the Reed house was magical. I decorated with Victorian authenticity, filling the rooms with garlands and candles and a tree in the parlor that reached nearly to the ceiling. Guests arrived seeking holiday charm, and we gave them that and more: hot cider by the fire, cookies shaped like stars, carols played on Grandma's old piano that I'd had restored and moved back to its place in the music room. Daniel spent Christmas Eve with me after the guests had retired to their rooms. We sat by the fire in the parlor, and he handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a key, old and ornate. The original key to the house, he explained. I found it in the basement during demolition and had it restored. I thought you should have it. I turned it over in my hands, feeling the weight of history and meaning. This key had opened doors for generations of my family. Now it was mine to hold, mine to pass on someday. New Year's Eve brought more guests, including Thomas and Linda returning for their promised second visit. They arrived with champagne and insisted we toast together at midnight. To the Reed house, Thomas said, raising his glass. And to Claire, who brought it back to life. To second chances, Linda added. And the courage to start over. To family, I said quietly. The ones we're born with and the ones we choose. Daniel's arm around my waist tightened slightly. To building things that last. We clinked glasses as midnight struck, and through the windows I could see fireworks blooming over Riverside's harbor. A new year, a new chapter, a new version of myself that had emerged from the ruins of the old. In February, I received an invitation to speak at a historic preservation conference in Portland. They wanted to hear about the Reed House transformation, about how historic properties could be viable businesses while maintaining their character. I accepted, and Daniel came with me for support. The presentation went better than I'd hoped. People were fascinated by the combination of preservation and innovation, by how I'd honored the past while creating something sustainable for the future. Afterward, several other property owners approached me about consulting on their own projects. By spring, I'd become known in restoration circles as someone who understood how to breathe new life into old buildings. I took on 3 consulting projects, helping other historic property owners develop business plans for their renovations. It felt right, using Grandma's gift to help preserve more of the past. The Reed House celebrated its first anniversary in August with a party that brought together everyone who'd helped make it real. Daniel and his crew, Patricia with her design expertise, Mr. Chin who'd guided me through the legal complexities, Vanessa who'd become my business partner and closest friend. Catherine Walsh came too, the lawyer who'd protected me when I needed it most. We gathered on the lawn, the house glowing golden in the evening light behind us. I stood on the porch where I'd stood so many times before and looked at these people who'd become my chosen family. A year ago, I started, my voice carrying across the gathering, I thought I'd lost everything. My marriage, my sister, my sense of who I was. But what I actually lost was a version of myself that was too small, too accommodating, too willing to accept less than I deserved. People nodded, and I saw understanding in their faces. My grandmother left me more than property. She left me a lesson about seeing value where others see only decay. About having faith that broken things can be made whole again. About understanding that sometimes you have to let the old version of your life burn down completely before something better can grow in its place. I looked at Daniel, who was watching me with love clear in his expression. She taught me that the people who truly care about you don't need you to be perfect or profitable or useful. They just need you to be yourself. And she taught me that the best revenge against people who tried to diminish you is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be. The applause was warm and genuine. Later, as the party wound down and guests drifted away, Daniel and I stood alone on the porch in the gathering dusk. I have something to ask you, he said, and his voice was nervous in a way I'd never heard. We've been building this life together for a year now. You've rebuilt this house, created a successful business, become this amazing person. And I've been lucky enough to be part of it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. I'm not Marcus. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes or that everything will always be easy. But I can promise that I'll never stop seeing you, never stop valuing you, never stop building toward our future together. The ring was perfect. A vintage emerald surrounded by small diamonds, set in gold that looked like it had been made for the house, for this moment, for us. Claire Dawson, will you marry me? Through happy tears, I said yes. We were married in November, a small ceremony in the parlor of the Reed house with just our closest friends present. Vanessa was my maid of honor. Daniel's brother was his best man. Mr. Chin gave me away, stepping into the role Grandma would have filled if she'd been there. But in a way, she was there. In every board of the house, every window that caught the light, every door that opened to welcome guests. She was there in the lessons she'd taught me about knowing my own worth, about seeing potential where others saw only problems, about building something meaningful from ruins. Marcus sent a card congratulating us. No return address, no personal note, just a generic congratulations message. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he and Natalie had separated shortly after their daughter was born. That he'd moved to California for a fresh start. That Natalie was living with their mother in a small apartment near the coast. I felt no triumph in their struggles. Just a distant hope that they'd both find ways to become better people, for their daughter's sake if nothing else. The Reed house continued to thrive. Daniel and I lived in the master suite, managing the business together while maintaining clear boundaries between our public and private lives. We expanded gradually, purchasing and restoring the house next door to create additional guest suites and a small event space for weddings and gatherings. Years passed in a warm succession of seasons and guests and growth. The neighborhood around us slowly revitalized, other historic homes finding new life as young families moved in and elderly residents found renewed pride in their properties. The Maple Grove district became known as Riverside's historic quarter, a destination for people seeking authentic character and carefully preserved beauty. And through it all, every morning when I walked through the house Grandma had left me, I remembered her final lesson, that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the courage to see your own value and the wisdom to build a life that honors it. Marcus had laughed when I quit that life we'd built together. Until he read my resignation from his version of our future. What it said, what it meant, had wiped the smile off his face and changed everything. I didn't just survive the betrayal. I transformed it into something beautiful, lasting, and entirely my own. And that, I think, is what Grandma had known I could do all along. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.